And in the top left, as the blue Protoss, we have Clash's Hellraiser. Romanticide has actually been giving us quite a lot of the longer PvPs for sure, in my experience. But as far as if you get there in a passive way or not, that's the big question marks. I think we've seen a lot of, I feel like recently I've been seeing a lot of preference on the Blink Stalker play. So, of course, that's what every PvP is nowadays. But I mean actually pushing Blink Stalkers as in massing Blink Stalkers, not diving right into disruptors, but rather going for like a proxy pylon, proxy gateway on 3 bases, and just building a ton of stalkers and trying to hit that timing. I've seen that actually so much, and I feel like it's even on Romanticide that I've seen it a decent amount of times, that I kind of even want to say that one person's going to do that. Just non-stop production of stalkers and kind of pushing away from just right up to disruptors, right up to DTs. If it works, great. If it doesn't, then yes, we'll get into Blink Disrupt there for sure.
Yeah, and I just, just the way that, even especially like, I guess this hasn't been as big of a thing. We only saw a few people really try it, but Hellraiser in my mind is someone who still might, but we got to see some fun Void Ray shenanigans last season. We got to see some pretty insane, like I'm going to go super fast carriers or what have you, games. And I like that with a map kind of like this, where I feel like the games can go very long. It's not really not the longest rush distance of all time, but the way that the natural and third are laid out kind of, and that pocket fourth base in the bottom, like a lot of things just feel very inviting towards those, the potential for the longer game. Of course, the cool thing about new seasons is that there might just be other things that like, I don't know, we haven't noticed or we just haven't seen yet. I certainly haven't seen a lot of games played on this map yet, but, I can say playing this map's very fun, and I always like when we get to have kind of creative design choices that aren't shoved in your face, right? It's not like there's some sort of insane mechanic that's broken. This map is just designed weirdly in a way that's just kind of like, yeah, you have to think a little bit playing this map. And I always appreciate when the map makers kind of find ways to challenge your conception of what a map is supposed to look like, but without turning it into a get cheesed every single game and hate your life map.
Yeah. It looks like Hellraiser feeling confident adding that Twilight Council first and foremost. He's about to scout that it's a Stargate. It's possible he was already a little suspicious about it, just with the depth openers. It's always like a little bit in the back of your mind. Depth's a little bit cheaper. Maybe they could get a Stargate. Well, now he knows for sure. And he is going to go ahead and grab a shield battery. I mean, now that he knows for sure, grabbing the shield batteries make a lot of sense. But if you're uncertain, then just having enough stalkers to spread around also works, right? In this case, a couple of sentries went in the main, the stalkers are keeping track of the adepts. But that Twilight Council should be going into Blink. For MaNa, he could try and go for like a Dark Shrine and hope that his opponent is going to push off a Robo as much as you would want them to. Because if they think they can get away with it, they're not going to get a Robo that quickly anymore in this meta. But it's actually MaNa going for a Forge as well, so definitely more macro-oriented.
Yes, and there was just a brief pause there in case you guys didn't notice. And I think that the player's just going to get everything set up. The referee does have to restart the game. That way no one can accidentally just like pause on pause and drive some craziness. Probably worth telling you that an Oracle did try to put a stasis trap inside of Hellraiser's mineral line, but the ward itself was killed before that could happen. However, the Adepts just waltz in like we're at a 50s ball, and they pick off one of the sentries, and the rest of them, I think we might have one of them get away from here, right? Just one.
Yeah.
In the natural.
I mean, that was surprisingly good crisis management. It's always been not to let the Adepts in at all, but with the Force Field and the Pylon and the Warp-In blocking, gotta give props to Hellraiser's Micro to deal with that. And it used to be back in the old days of PvP with the Immortal Zealot Archon thing that the more stalkers you warped in, the more it was like, do you really want those units? But now, since everyone's going to Blink, I mean, warping in stalkers, even when it's not the timing that you would want, it still isn't like the worst thing ever. And they both have grabbed a Forge, so very similar times on the +1. Hellraiser does have a decent timing for his Blink, but it doesn't seem like he's really committing to anything as far as, again, continuously building stalkers. That's what you really want to pay attention to in PvP. The tech structures, of course, obviously, but there's a lot of time where pro players aren't building the units. They have those gaps where they're chronoing out probes and getting gas geysers and getting their technology. And then there's times where they're doing nothing but building units and trying to get as many as possible for kind of a surprise attack onto like a faster third, for instance. But MaNa's just correct. He should be getting a third, as well as Hellraiser should also be grabbing his third.
Yeah, we just have to consider as well, right? It's just the defensive layout of this map. The opening by in front of that third, like the direct path, is blocked off by a mineral wall. So you literally have to mine your way through to actually get to that base without going through the natural area where your army's already there, or going all the way around from that low ground base, in which point you're trying to move up a ramp where you could get force fielded, cut to pieces. Any number of bad things can happen to you when you just walk up a ramp, not knowing what's on the other side of it. But it might be time for me to pop a bottle here, Jess. We do finally have the Dark Shrine. I've been waiting to see some Dank Templar all day today, and I'm finally getting it. Dark Shrine is booting up for MaNa in his main base, tucked in very nicely, while he sends the Phoenix out to do the hallucination scout. And I'm guessing as well, just kind of based off what we've been talking about and the way this map is laid out and some of the light harass going between both of these players, that neither of them is really worried about the big attack. We just kind of have them powering up. I assume you want to saturate your third and then maybe, like you were saying, divert those chrono boosts to the production and try to build up that army. But thus far, outside of the Dark Shrine only for MaNa, it's been almost the same kind of flow for both players.
Yeah, and it might be because of the map. Kind of does seem like it has more of a preference for longer games, or just a mutual respect. Or, I mean, yeah, MaNa tried a little bit with Adept Oracle, but very, very close PvP. Charge comes down for both players. I mean, that's going to help with harassment, as well as occasionally with the engagements. You might say, oh, when disruptors are out, it's going to be useless. No, it pretty much never is. The Dark Shrine is always an interesting timing for me, because I watch these PvPs, and it's like, it seems like some people throw it down, and then just like, I sit there questioning, like, well, you're going to use DTs? You're going to do it? 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 And they don't.
Then I throw in the Palpatine gif and say, do it!
Yeah, exactly. Like, you expect them to, but the kind of weird thing about PvP, and MaNa's hallucination scouted that, is that you're going to anticipate DTs, right? So usually around, I guess, 7 minutes, apparently, cannon and shield battery go down for every single mineral line. And then the person who got the Dark Shrine is like, well, one DT is only going to cut it. I guess I got to wait for that moment in PvP where we're both banking a ton on 90 probes, and then I'll throw them 10 DTs with DT Blink. And it's like, why even bother getting to that earlier Dark Shrine? It's just one of those little weird things about PvP, because Hellraiser is getting his, and of course they're going to use it eventually, but MaNa didn't do anything with that yet.
I don't disagree with you, but I do think if he had gotten like Shadow Stride early, then it would have made more sense, because that upgrade also takes a while. So I'm like, you can't immediately get Blink DTs, but if you get it a little bit earlier because you want to get DT Blink, then I think it makes more sense. But since he hasn't started that upgrade yet, I'm on your side with this. It's more like I just want to have a Dark Shrine for whenever I do decide that I want to use them. But I was also hoping to see some earlier DT usage myself, Zombie Grub. These Stalkers are just going to run away. There are many more Stalkers here for Hellraiser than there are for MaNa, but that's kind of why we call it PvP bowling, because the Disruptors can kill. You can get one pin, or you can get them all, Zombie Grub, with a good Purification Nova from MaNa. So he doesn't need to have more Stalkers if he lands his Disruptor shots properly. And that's the name of the game. That is, to some degree, that's just PvP. And I do kind of find it wild that the focus from Hellraiser right now just looks like it's literally just Mass Gateway, and they both start Shadow Stride at the same time, which is DT Blink.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's another interesting facet about PvP and its continued development, honestly. Like, it seems like things are slightly changing constantly until 3 months later it's like, oh, well, something's really changed. But I feel like 3-4 months ago, it was, obviously there's a time you just have to go into Disruptors. If your opponent's going into Disruptors, you better be right behind them, right? Or they better be on 1 and you're on 2 Orbos or whatever. And now we're seeing a lot more people actually play around on purpose, not because they're down and desperate. They're playing more to just the Mass Gateway and trying to outmaneuver their opponent, even against the super deadly Disruptors, even against the Disruptor counter 6. or 8. That was a little scary there. And
I'm like, you say that, but I'm like, if he could have just killed the whole army. I'm I'm sweating over here.
I know, right? But yeah, I do think that Hellraiser might be playing a little bit too much into this. I think you still want a second Robo and Robotics Bay in case you have to emergency make up for 12, 15 lost Stalkers, but certainly he can take engagements like this if he has Blink.
Yeah.
And actually the concaves and whatnot, but not if he's just running away.
Well, you just described it beautifully. Because there's no disruptors for Hellraiser, MaNa's able to blink his Stalkers onto Hellraiser and fire the Nova at the same time. And Hellraiser cannot try to trade, even though he has more Stalkers, and he doesn't have more Stalkers anymore, but he couldn't even try to trade because the Nova was coming. So all he can do is take some damage, take more damage running away, and that's it. He doesn't actually have any other options in his playbook other than what I assume is about to be this insane yeet of Zealot DT from the left side. He's about to blink DTs, I imagine, try to blink the DTs onto all of this. But I guess his Stalkers got pushed away too, so he's gonna have to just chill back. This is such a weird... He's like, I'm gonna do Zealot DT flank while I kill you with Blink Stalkers. I still don't see how that beats good disruptor control.
I think it doesn't beat good disruptor control and good positioning and good scouting, okay? But if you're missing any one of those things, then it gets really dangerous. And that's also a nice thing about opening up with Stargate, by the way, is that you're going to have an Oracle, and if you lose it, it's even maybe preferable to rebuild the Oracle. Because scouting is pinnacle, whether you're talking about disruptors versus disruptors, or you're talking about backstabs and positioning and, yeah, following DTs when they come to numbers of 10 or 12. Maybe over-aggressive on the right side. He does have to worry about that large swath of Zealot DT, but apparently he's fine. He's building extra static defense. You don't usually see warp-ins of the force field to deal with that, but that works, sure. He's actually continuing to bully back Hellraiser with the Stalkers, as well as getting DTs in Hellraiser's natural.
I think we need to buff overcharge on the shield battery. I can't believe that 5 DTs were able to kill that poor innocent Nexus in the natural. But I'm just gonna echo again what we've been saying, that I just really like MaNa's strategical choices here. I feel like Hellraiser was trying to do something really cute with like this big eco play, taking all these bases and trying to be out on the map with lots of gateway forces, but it just hasn't worked. Like, maybe this is a type of style that plays a little bit better if MaNa is slower or also does something weird. But this just, I mean, at the end of the day, it just looks like MaNa has set himself up with the ultimate. He's just got a crazy amount of disruptors that he could shoot out forever.
I think it might have worked better if it was a little bit newer. I think that is becoming one of those options. It's kind of like if it's a TVT playing super drop heavy versus playing super engagement heavy, you know, like if it's new, if you're not getting used to it fast enough, like you'll die, you'll be torn apart. But it seems like MaNa kind of even predicted this to an extent. Like his left side base was really well defended. Looks amazing. Even against the first attack, and it's been continually well defended as Hellraiser continues adding more and more units. See this just potential.
Gateway all the way. Gateway all the way. I don't know. His Hellraiser's gonna drop his new albums. Gates on gates on gates, I suppose. He is getting gravitic drive though. I do love to see that. I feel like this map kind of asks for prisms. You do have some decent bit of air angles that you can take. And he's got a sandwich on that middle base, but everything about this is just so awkward. It's just like tons of DTs and tons of DTs. But then pushing in with the Zealots when there's this many disruptors also just seems like insane.
Well, that wasn't a cancel, but I mean, they're both banking, so it's not too problematic. I mean, there's things that can still happen, right? Like MaNa could not have detection at one point and have all of its disruptors blinked on. It gets really awkward to engage GTs with like your disruptors. I mean, some of them will survive, of course, as the disruptor Nova is finally hit. And pretty good, but it could have been an option for Hellraiser. Yeah, he's got for mostly Zealots now, as the DTs have died, and I don't think they're really going to cut it. MaNa's also pushing into Hellraiser, and with his own DTs blinking aggressively. I mean, when Hellraiser has a ruined maneuver, how does he win these engagements?
Yeah, he can't. There's nothing he can do. There's like 7 or 8 disruptors here. Like, he could try to blink onto them and kill all of them at once and hope that none of the shots land on his Stalkers. Like, I'm not going to say that that's impossible. You're just, I mean, that's a dice roll if I've ever seen one. I don't know. That's like putting your bank account on red. I'm just like, I can't condone that kind of risky behavior. I
feel like Hellraiser, I didn't mind it for the thing up until about 2 minutes ago. Okay, it's kind of working out. Yeah, the disruptor's out of ammo or getting chased down, and actually every single disruptor is going to go down. He's got 3 somewhere in the back, and his DTs, MaNa, so that is actually doing some damage off to the left. But that can be the strength of the mass gateway. Plus, it's going to be a bit cheaper and faster to recharge, to resupply, so you can continue with the aggression. But MaNa does now finally have his 5th base actually up and secured. This 4th has been secured throughout 5 or 6 attacks. And it does seem like Hellraiser, yeah, I think he just has to get into disruptors at some point. You know, like he wins that last engagement, great, but it was still really scary for him. And that's what I was trying to bring up, is that I feel like he's played around long enough with the mass gateways, and maybe now it is about time to go into your own disruptors.
Yeah, I would not hate that. I mean, disruptors are just good, right? There's very little, in my opinion, that you're like, very little reason not to at least always try to get a few disruptors. Whether you love them or hate them, the zoning potential is amazing, the game ending potential is amazing, and they're also just, their range is nice, right? You can kind of be a little bit protected with them. This big gateway force from Hellraiser, he does have a disruptor to back this up, getting some work done on the south side while MaNa tries to push the northeast. And I've liked the way that Hellraiser has kind of worked around with taking those bases. Even though he got pushed off of that upper center one in front of the 3rd, he was still able to secure the west side expansion. He's using his army in a manner that actually allows him to defend it. He's got 3 observers with this army, by the way, so even if those cannons did focus fire down 1 or 2 of them, the DTs wouldn't still just be able to bail him out instantly. And we've got these trades happening on both sides now. The army supply very even. Even the resource available to both of the players is very, very close. It's a heavily control-based situation. 3, 4 DTs are going to come over to this army while he recalls, but 2 of the DTs die before the recall finishes, and there's still a bunch of observers here, so he needs to get rid of the observers first, and then he can try to micro the DTs. Good blink of the single one out of that Nova. Very, very clutch play there by MaNa, and I actually do like that he left the Archon here to get that splash damage on the probes.
Yeah, it didn't work out quite so well to get the extra 5 or 6, but certainly both of them dealt damage to each other's economies. It is funny how much they're kind of getting out of here relatively even. Hellraiser just finishes +2 armor. I guess that's worth noting, as some of these engagements are all about the Stalkers versus Stalkers, or DTs versus Stalkers. It looks like the Observer is in the top left, so you can't chase into that, but then actually aggressively blings on top of the Disruptor, something you can absolutely do with DTs. Sometimes it's not worth it, sometimes it is. As every last Disruptor goes down for Hellraiser, he does clean up the DTs, and there's not a whole lot of Stalkers left for MaNa, but he now has a significant Disruptor lead. Can he actually carry that to a victory, though, as that left side base, finally, it's like the 8th, 9th attack on it, actually gets cracked and dies.
Yeah. What a weird game we've watched. And somehow, after all of this, with all the memeing and dreaming and what have you, I think Hellraiser's tenacity with taking bases and his aggression, it's carved him into a really nice spot. I say as the army starts to get whacked away at by Dark Templar, but I'm not sure they could actually kill it fast enough to make the impact they might be looking for. Hellraiser's position looks really good. At the same time, I go back to MaNa has 8 disruptors, so anything is possible. And a lot of that supply is in 28 charge lots that Hellraiser has. So he's kind of playing around with a philosophy that says, look, yes, disruptors can just, Nova themselves if the Zealots charge on them, but the control is not actually always there to make that happen. And you're usually also going to be worried about things like the rest of the other units, or your Nova's already being shot out to deal with those Stalkers, but that's what makes it tough, and he's going to try to capitalize on that now that he's gotten a few of the hits off, but there's still some Novas in the bag for MaNa, and he, in a blink of an eye, smashes down that supply lead. But if there's anything I have to still just keep giving Hellraiser credit for, he's taking that bottom left, the very bottom left corner base. MaNa's income relative to Hellraiser's is plummeting.
Yeah, it is. It's not looking so hot the longer the game goes on. Gotta give credit to MaNa there, by the way. He knew what Hellraiser's plan was. As soon as those Zealots on top of his Disruptors, he was like, oh, you're gonna come in and flank me, aren't you? And already starting the fight off with one good Disruptor shot was, I think, something that other players would have just been so panicked, because what you were talking about, the Zealots really make a panic situation when they jump on top of those Disruptors. Do I fire 2, 3, 4? Do I blink to stop them from killing my Disruptors, or wait because I know the other army's there? And we have another apparently base trade. Maybe it'll be a 1-for-1, which would not favor MaNa, or maybe an actual base race. They both have plenty of observers, and I think all of them have observers with their armies. That is a lot of stacked defense to the left. Disruptor's a little late to the party. Stalker's going down is not something that MaNa can actually afford. He knows the entire army of Hellraiser is also digging into his bases, actually denying some of the stacked defense. There are observers, so the DTs will not be getting a lot done. A desperate pro pool to try and help out, and a recall has to be used. Now that is Hellraiser losing 2 bases, with MaNa losing, well, I guess 1, but the problem is Hellraiser had more bases to begin with.
Yeah, that's the most interesting thing about this game. Even though Hellraiser kind of went for an inefficient composition, this was like watching one of the ways that like a Protoss would try to deal with Terran mech, right? You're like, I'm just going to take a bunch of bases. I'm going to get an insane number of warp gates. And even though I won't take the best fights, I am going to have so much money that as long as I'm trading bases with you, kind of like you were just saying, that's going to favor Hellraiser, because when you have 7 bases and your opponent has 5, yeah, of course you want to trade base for base, because you know, that's gonna, what is 1/7 of your economy is 1/5 of his. So you absolutely, I think, hit the nail on the head on like the way that MaNa didn't necessarily do the wrong thing. He just played a game where Hellraiser was able to exploit the fact that he dealt with the army somewhat well, but not the economy, not the bases. Oh my God, these 2 disruptors. No! Well, I might put a button on this one, Zombie Grub. The rest of these stalkers tried to go out and get those guys, and now they're getting killed too.
Unfortunate there for MaNa. I mean, he was losing this game for sure, but maybe he could have caught 2 disruptors and still had the supreme lead of disruptors, and then also a decent amount of stalkers. Now the stalker difference is kind of crazy. MaNa really has to hope that Hellraiser gets overconfident, but I think Hellraiser would only get overconfident if he was losing out on bases, which right now, MaNa is not doing anything to harass. Like, a single DT could take down the bottom left base, but he can't do it. He's too busy focusing on the front lines. In fact, he has 3 observers down there. They're going to see about 25 zealots charging into his 3rd base, but no harassment of his own.
And when you're this rich, you can just throw 30 zealots at your opponent, by the way, like this. And this doesn't cost him much of anything. He's got an observer here, too, that he brought over, so his zealots can fight the DTs, and 3 DTs alone can't just hold it, but he gets into a nice choke. He's going to force them back. But when your opponent can comfortably do that because they have an 80 supply lead, that's a problem.
Yeah. And he's going to bring over his own DTs this time, too. MaNa's going to try and push Hellraiser's Stalker Ball back, and that's where he's going to take in some of the decent engagements when Hellraiser has no more room to maneuver. But that's when Hellraiser strikes with his other, like, half of his army, basically, and finds MaNa without the appropriate defense. I mean, MaNa did have it for about 12, 13 minutes of this game, but then at some point started to lose control of his bases and lose control of the army fights. This one might be the last one. The disruptors recall, is that what happens? And GG. Not able to help out. MaNa ends up losing that game. Kind of a surprise, not just because we expected MaNa to win, but because it seemed like he was winning for the first half of the game.
Yeah, no, he did extremely well. And trying to pinpoint like where it went wrong, just at least for me, the only things that really stand out is like Hellraiser just got so greedy with taking the expansions. And you kind of pointed out that MaNa wasn't doing a good job of knocking those down. And part of that is because Hellraiser was super aggressive. He's like, I'm going to have more Blink Stalkers than you. I might lose a few to the disruptors, but it won't matter because I'm going to have like 2 more bases than you. And as long as I maintain my extra base count, throwing away these amount of units isn't that big of a deal because the disruptors are slow. They are somewhat vulnerable to being pounced on, even if you do try to counterattack, like with the Novas on yourself. You know, you're not guaranteeing that you're actually going to kill the whole army when you do that. So what a wild game. And there was only one other thing that I noticed that as a not Protoss player, I can't say whether this was like a game deciding type thing, but Hellraiser also had +3 armor for his Stalkers and Zealots. And MaNa had +3 attack and +2 shields, which Hellraiser also had. So on top of the same upgrades, he also had +3 ground armor, which I think actually does end up having a pretty big impact when you have units like Zealots or even just enough Stalkers shooting at each other at the same time, right?
When it came to MaNa defending with anything but disruptors, yeah, absolutely it played a part. You know, disruptors don't care about upgrades, but everything else does. And Hellraiser is playing with everything else and forcing MaNa to also play with everything else. I mean, maybe if MaNa gets a redo on that game, he secures his 5 bases, that's where he was the strongest, and he pushes out, but then he actually leaves 2 disruptors at home and controls them perfectly too, which is would be quite the ask. But instead, he eventually just couldn't keep up with the amount being thrown in multiple directions. He could protect 2 bases on either side of the map, plus push into his opponent, and that's when we saw the actual benefits of the way that Hellraiser was playing. So, I mean, that was a really good execution, especially towards the latter half from Hellraiser. But this guy certainly has more possibilities in PvP. He's got different builds, guys. He's got different approaches. It's not going to be game over quite yet. Or series over, I should say. Light shade for game number 2 in the bottom right. As the red Protoss, he is Team Liquid's MaNa.
And MaNa's opponent in the northwest, a blue Protoss player leading this series 1-0. He is from Clash. He is Hellraiser. Since it's Halloween, there might be a sound still playing. All right, gave it a second. Since it's Halloween, Jess, as well, I would like to see if Hellraiser continues to make it and we get to the point where we need the cameras on all the players. I would like to see Hellraiser's best Hellraiser cosplay.
Oh,
That's
yeah?
what I want. Yeah.
You know what would be sick is him cosplaying Hellraiser and then Rainer's like weirdly like hellish background if they're facing each other. I think that would be the perfect Halloween night there. Because
well, and Ellen shows up, it's like, hey, we have the cube. We actually have it. Here you go.
I'll, yeah. Man, it feels
That's
like
a good Halloween movie recommendation for you guys if you want to watch. What was that, 80s or 90s classic?
Yeah, I think so. 80s, yeah. Well, I said MaNa's not done yet. He's got tricks. He's got things to do. And his probe was casually hanging around.
It's the fake. He faked us out. He even juked us.
Yeah, I mean, he had it on patrol for like 2 seconds, so I was getting ready to hype it, but decides not to. I mean, either, he just usually does that or decided not to do it. I don't know. It probably wouldn't be because probe scouted, because you just expect probe scouts in PvP, but well, Hellraiser is going to be looking around for the second pylon to determine, hey, is it real, is it not real? He's not going to stick around with a pylon to see what pops out of these 2 gateways. So he's going to miss that it's a stalker opener, but he is going to use that probe to scout, and looks like it'll eventually not scout the pylon. Just kidding. It's going to avoid it.
Ooh, okay. Well, even if he was able to see the probe with the pylon, like something like that can, weirdly enough, because he's not hiding anything there, but if you see a probe there, you might think to yourself, is he hiding something there? These are like all the kind of weird mind games that make PvP a nightmare, because as strong as like some Protoss units feel, like, they're the big, heavy machines that cost a lot, cool upgrades, laser beams and all that jazz. Probes are very vulnerable units, and you definitely do not want to get caught off guard by anything. I'm always going to be a fan of like these sentry openers too, just because the hallucinated Phoenix gives you so much information. And we've seen plenty of players, even at disadvantaged build order scenarios where they go for these sentries, still make good defenses happen off of a faster Nexus just by having that information and being able to control the response. Even if it's not perfect, they still find a way to kind of tune it and make it work. Let's see if MaNa can do that here, because 4 Stalkers versus just 2 with the 2 sentries. He does have the other ones coming out with that defender's advantage, but it's actually just 3 right now, so there is a moment of weakness. Tries to pick that one off, so trades 1 for 1, but the Nexus being a little bit faster is still something he's going to have. He's going to be able to write home about that.
Plus, he might have the better end of the openers here. As he scouts that it is a Stargate opener, he's going to have units in position to stop the Oracle from doing damage, which means he'll have the faster Twilight Council, faster Blink. I mean, you see where I'm going with this. He could have an economic advantage if he defends the Oracles perfectly. But, at some point, 2 Oracles especially should get at least a couple of probes. And that is what Hellraiser is going to stop with the Stargate production.
Yeah, and as fun as the Stargate memes can be, yeah, I mean, they made that change, it was like a year ago now with the Oracles, or was that 2 years? Now I'm an old man now, I can't remember anymore, but when they made the Oracles armored so that the Stalkers could be a bit more effective at killing them, that really helped. So no, you're not going to see any mega crazy Oracle shenanigans. You do want to try to get on top of the probes, because The oracles themselves aren't tremendously strong since they can be caught by blink. So when they go out on the map, it's very hard to actually get them home without hiding them in like this pocket and recalling. But even that, I don't mind. Even if he just chills there, like there's so little you can do with the oracles that if you just leave them there and the opponent has to leave units here or build cannons or something dumb, like you've at least accomplished something with them, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe throw a tag on them.
I think what's really important about this specific scenario, though, is that MaNa did, it seems like, intentionally push off his Forge. So that usually means he's going to do an attack of some sort. Whether it's a super committed attack is, the question. As we see a third Nexus going down and a Forge coming down now, it's not going to be super committed. But I think partially not just to defend his probes, he also was trying to make sure that the Oracles didn't scout the lack of Forge. Because he does move out, and if Hellraiser had not warped in anything, had not recalled his oracles, then he gets a couple of units sliced off. He gets 3 or 4 stalkers sliced off, and they lose because MaNa's blink is so much faster. Doesn't really snowball to a game-winning victory, but it could have been something. Instead, I think Hellraiser kind of figured it out because he did recall, he did warp in, and now he even has, I think, more gateways because he had been finishing up his own gateways. And now we have to wonder, as we see Hellraiser not get a third Nexus and have additional gateways, is he going to use perhaps an advantage of Stalker count to move across the map as his third Nexus comes down? Because, well, with it being now almost an entire Nexus later, it does feel like it's now Hellraiser's prerogative to do something to MaNa.
Well, I feel like the scenario you were describing earlier just ended up working out perfectly for MaNa, right? He took the third Nexus while he was moving out, while he was getting that Forge. He was kind of putting a few things in place. But that third was actually still much faster than the Hellraiser third base, and even still at this very moment is significantly faster. So you get the option to put that pressure on. You're delaying the expansion. You're creating opportunities for yourself. But more importantly, you're kind of like buying all this space. You're like getting the whole map in your pocket because your opponent has to give respect to that big army you have out front. If you get caught off guard or out of position, you don't have the energy for the recall immediately available at the exact second that they go in on you, you can just die because they will have the option to also recall, right? And as an attacking player, that's always something that you're going to try to keep on your mind. So Hellraiser's going to move across, try to do a bit of poking and prodding, but I'm also just going to throw a little bit of respect as well towards the direction that MaNa took this game by not going straight into like double Robo Disruptor, because I think he's also realizing that while his third may have been faster, it's possible that Hellraiser tries to, like he did on the last game, get a much faster fourth and fifth base.
That could be very well where we're going. A very similar game in a couple of minutes. But yeah, right now, both are putting preference on the gateway production, as it's really hard to exactly tell if I am going to be pushed. Because right there, actually, is Hellraiser just used it as a poke when he moved up the ramp. He did have a potential. He had the +1, and some of the army supply was in like sentries that may or may not have actually helped that much, depending if they're focus fired. I mean, it's got to be you got to be careful about just putting all of the resources into a second robo, or your first robo even, and a robotics bay. So MaNa actually adding an Immortal kind of felt like it was defensive, but then he added on a Warp Prism as well, and now he's clearly engaging over on Hellraiser's side of the map. Hellraiser, he will have an upgrade advantage if he's given about 25, 30 seconds, but he doesn't have his stag defense set up yet, and this could be kind of bloody for him.
Yeah, there's not really a lot of force field energy available here too, right? It was just that one sentry, and that immediately died without doing anything, to be honest, Zombie Grub. So while, yes, you can blink behind the force fields, that means your Nexus and your probes are under attack. And I think we all know as well, having an Immortal to anchor this army makes it a lot harder too. He does blink onto the Immortal, and while he focus fired it down, that did give MaNa time for all of his other units to keep fighting, keep shooting. He's going for the Prism. He does get the Prism kill, but Zombie Grub, at what cost?
Kind of all of his stalkers, and as +2 is finishing as well. Excellent timing there from MaNa. GG brings it back to the 1-1 scoreline, and then we get a game 3, which is exactly what I was hoping for, so I am quite happy.
Well, I'll tell you what, I came into this show very hungry because I only had half a bowl of Cinnamon Toast Crunch, and I am getting my fill right now. If you want your fill, don't worry. We're going to take a couple minutes, get ourselves warmed up, get ourselves pumped up for this final map of this best of 3 coming up after a short break. You're right. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the DreamHack Masters StarCraft 2. We are having a good time here. I'm Nathanius, joined by Zombie Grub. We're tied 1 apiece. Been a nice, fun PvP series between MaNa and Hellraiser. I'm satisfied just because I got to see 5,000 DTs in game number 1. That's really the only reason I actually agreed to cast this tournament at all, was just to watch people blink Dark Templar. So I'm glad. I'm very happy for that.
That's why you came here, and then after this one, you're gonna peace out.
Exactly.
That's cool, man. That's cool. I'll cast the rest of the series by myself. I mean, I kind of got to see what I wanted, which was the differences of styles that PvP now has. I mean, it was really for one point Immortal Charge Light Archon, and that was pretty much the same thing from both sides. Then it was all proxies, and then it was, pretty much Blink Disruptor with not so many, like, intricate little details and clever timings and whatnot. And now we have this whole, just the amount of stuff that can happen in a PvP is kind of insane. And that last game was one of the perfect games for that. There was a lot of little tiny things that could have mounted up to a lot of things. And what it actually amounted to was that MaNa was able to push on that third and win. Now we're on Death Aura for the final game. In the bottom right, as the blue Protoss for Team Clash, he is Hellraiser.
And his opponent in the northwest position, spawning as the red Protoss from Team Liquid, he is MaNa.
And of course, PvP has always had its little intricate details, but the fact that it can be played around so much by no Forge or Forge, or how quick do you get your Robo? Do you mix in an Immortal like he did? Do you go from mass Blink Stalkers or right into Disruptors? Hell, I mean, what we could see on Death Aura, one of the more defensive maps that we have, we could actually see the kind of conservative playstyle with Disruptor Blink into Tempests, or even Surprise Carriers, trying to get that ahead of your opponent. So I guess that's what we didn't see in the last 2 games, but certainly a way to close out a PvP if it continues going on.
Oh, yeah. Well, now I just, we get some of the progression. We had some good PvP. Now's the part where I break out my inner streamer version of Pig, where I'll just let all the filthiness come out. I want to see just, 15 carriers on each side with 30 photon cannons and shield batteries, all trying to kill each other's interceptors in midair, until the point where we have so many actors in the game moving around at once that it just crashes everybody at the same time. And we're like, oh my God, we have to restart. And then we do it again, Zombie Grub. And then we do it again, except everyone plays at 720p to try and limit the potential of that happening, of crashing at least.
Okay, so kind of like the Broodlord versus Broodlord scenario back in 2014, I want to say, because I think it was Heart of the Storm, actually, for ZVZ before they made it not abductable. I think it was Stefano and some others who broke the game. Maybe a fire kick or someone who gets the late game quite often. But that literally broke the game, guys. There's too many things in the game. The game is we can't keep making more stuff. So hello, stop it. Would love to see that with carriers and interceptors.
Dude, CCMU was the worst thing in Brood War, okay? People, I was not crazy on the 1v1 scene there, but the amount of the mass units games that I played, I was one of those guys that just tried to build enough units to break the game every map. So naturally, I always lost because I never had upgrades. Because once we hit CCMU, it's oh yes, your 10 times spawn rate no longer works. And I'm limited by the technology of my time. And I always find that funny when people are like, guys, why didn't they raise the supply cap in SC2? I'm like, bro, have you seen what this game looks like when there's 200 Zerglings out on the map? And the Terran players got mines and marines everywhere, and there's all this, I don't know about you, but I'm pretty sure if they raised the melee cap to 300, half of our tournaments would have ended in blue screens. The ones after we added resume from replay still would have ended in blue screens.
Yeah. I absolutely would. I can't even imagine a world of 300 is the max, and I'm thinking of Blink Stalker Disruptor battles, it just spans 2 screens worth. There's so many units. Much more important than that is that Hellraiser is going for a proxy Dark Shrine. So I kind of mentioned this earlier, in that in PvP, if you think you can get away with it, you're going to push off that Robo for a decent amount of time, I guess 6 or 7 minutes, something like that, unless you have your own attack planned, right? But yeah, if you can, it's Twilight Council first and foremost, and then, yeah, probably a Forge. In this case, it was Stargate, then for Twilight Council, but you can kind of hope that your opponent has, like, no detection whatsoever, which is not the case this game, but we know how finicky the Oracle detection can be. So MaNa could still take a lot of damage from these DTs if he doesn't figure out what his opponent's doing. I don't see a reason why he would. All he's seen is a Twilight Council, and it's basic enough. There could be a Forge hidden somewhere. So how much? That's the question. How much you're going to see damage done wise? Could be brutal.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as far as PvP goes, there are so many ways to deal damage, but this is like, once you start to learn how to actually play the game, it becomes like Babby's first step is you learn how to do oracles, you learn how to send the 2 adepts. And then you either play versus the people who defend it well, or you play versus the people like Roddy who are like, I'm going to leave it open intentionally so that you send your depths in here so that they die, but you still get a couple of probes, and that does end up making it worth it at the end of the day. But it's just a nice little trade by both of them. They're just kind of, it's like just playing a little bit of catch. Now, the DT's coming out. This is where things can get ugly. So we got 2 of them running over to that natural. And, well, Zombie Grub, I think he's going to be very happy to see that the Robo is starting right in front of the natural. He could easily kill the Robo before it finishes. He may not even need to really go for it. Just kill probes and be happy there, too.
Good sight. So I was trying to, like, determine if MaNa had really been able to tell, like, that was a late Forge and be a little suspicious. I think it was kind of on the edge of being like, was that a late Forge? Like, my +1 on the recent started 2. But he was at least paying attention to his natural, paying attention to, I guess, a typical 2-base DT for PvP. And that did save at least a couple more probes, right? Because only 2 went down, and then one of the main could have done maybe 3-4 probes of damage if they was really late to the Oracles coming back. So that could have been much worse. I think that could have been, if he wasn't paying attention, if he was microing his Oracles on the other side of the map this entire time, could have been like 15 probes. But he brought him back, and he's even getting his adepts back into the main base, getting 3 of his own. And is certainly later to his 3rd Nexus. He's actually still later to Blink and +1, it looks like, as well. But at least he is taking the Dark Shrine out of the equation, and he still has Oracles, which, Stasis Traps certainly can help. Just consistent scouting can help, and they can still get damage on the probe lines, too.
Yeah, I do like the stasis traps, though, as you're talking about being able to kind of zone out some of that space on the map. But man, that's a really good point to bring up, though. That DTs could have gotten so much damage done, but going for the, like, it's weird because the reason why you don't want to just throw both of them in immediately is because they could have something that can see them. But it was only that hesitation to move in that actually gave Hellraiser the time to react, or excuse me, that gave MaNa the time to react and get the shutdown on it without taking too much damage. But at the end of the day, I still really like the way that Hellraiser tries to expand aggressively. Couldn't really get it done on the last map with the way that thing started out for MaNa. But I'm also wondering if we're going to have Hellraiser play that mega gateway style again, right? Is he just going to focus on having observers, getting charged, getting his Forge upgrades, leaning away from the disruptors? So far, with just 3 geysers mining, I'm going to say yes. We're going to see just a mega gateway style. And MaNa, he's already built a couple of Immortals. He's getting a Prism. But I'm wondering if he's going to end up going back into the disruptors, or if he's going to try to just beat him at his own game, right? Just building insane amounts of gateway forces.
Yeah, I'm a little surprised that he's not getting charge. He has a Forge. But he's not getting charged, like, no matter what his choice is right now. Because it feels like he is going to engage. That's funny, now I can't kill the DT. But it seems like he is preparing to attack by getting a Warp Prism. But, I mean, so does his opponent, and his opponent's not doing anything, right? And he's gotten a couple of Immortals, but you would think he's also going to get charged, as the game is probably going to continue, or maybe even charge with this attack would have been really great. As it is, it's later than his opponent. Now the 2 Immortals might be kind of awkward if Hellraiser does show up with a decent amount of Zealots, which is exactly what he's doing. He's one hitting a sharper timing, stronger composition, I feel like, if it's ideal. He's got that nice concave, right? +2 and charge being done. Pops the Stasis Trap he had seen with his DT earlier, I believe, and now MaNa, he's got to make sure his Immortals are actually attacking the right unit, right? And then he doesn't get concaved on, which he does by actually taking control of the high ground. But Hellraiser also had to attack the main base. When Giselle's being warped in, Recall is going to clean this up eventually. It was enough left back on the other side of the map, though. Like his third base, retreat back into the shield batteries. The overcharge barely saving the Immortal, and then the Warp Prism picks it up as well. Excellent control from MaNa.
Oh my God!
Excellent crisis management.
Oh, what? How? Okay, well, he took some damage from that attack, but I was more than certain that we were going to see a whole lot of MaNa's auxiliary forces, the supporting units that ran over to that third base, die horrible, painful deaths. First of all, great job keeping the Warp Prism alive. I do think that's one of the most important units, but having that one Immortal there too, with the regen, with the shields, with that stasis, just buys you so much time for the Stalkers to clean up those Zealots and make their way down to the third.
Yeah.
I was getting real anxious watching that fight, Zombie Grub. That was Hellraiser was trying to do something really cool there, but MaNa's playing really well this game.
Well, I've always known MaNa as someone who could really, he has excellent control in micro. The problem used to be that he would just be like too far down anyways, and the last minute Super Saiyan, didn't actually help him. But it feels like he's certainly been a newer MaNa in this year, and he certainly is proving that, again, he has excellent control and crisis management. Initiating a counterattack. We'll see how this works out. A couple force fields going down. The Zealots, at the very least, will be trapped behind those, and I don't think Hellraiser has the means to blink aggressively beyond those force fields. So nice little control of this fourth base and continuing to control. He's actually getting some serious damage done. Both Immortals still alive. A sentry for Guardian Shield. Oh, but a Dark Shrine was rebuilt. A second Warp Prism as well. So there's going to be a bit of tit for tat. The entire Nexus might fall.
Yeah, I really like MaNa's army. Blinks forward, snipes the Oracle. I feel like he might have been trying to get the Prism there. As long as you have that reinforcement capability, that's really nice. By the way, his whole entire army is on top of the overcharged shield battery. Would have loved to see him focus that down a little bit faster. I would definitely want to get the Nexus on the way out, but Hellraiser being able to keep that alive is that's an ace maneuver right there, because I definitely thought that he was going to lose that at the very least. But instead, he gets to clean up almost the whole entire army, now sitting with a pretty comfortable supply lead just off of the harass alone. Didn't lose a whole mineral line of workers at that Nexus, and that ends up really, really helping with that DT counter that he had going at the same time. And I'm going to take it a step further. Zombie Grub is +3 attacks about to finish, and I'm feeling like everything's kind of coming up aces right now. The only thing that stands out difference-wise between these two players at the moment has just been that Hellraiser kind of avoids the tech. Obviously, both players are going to like DTs. DTs are fantastic in PvP, but MaNa's been trying to use the Immortals, been trying to bring out these Prisms, be a little bit more technical. Now he's just going crazy on the Stalkers, and I feel like he needs to make something happen here, and that's usually when either greatness emerges or somebody falls over painfully.
I feel like he really... Maybe the best thing to do there was to try and bring some units over to that fourth and just like tap it. It is so low. I'm not sure a main engagement is going to go very well. He doesn't really catch Hellraiser that much by surprise. Hellraiser also has an upgrade lead that has kicked in. The DTs aren't helping out very much, but the Concave is superior for Hellraiser. The upgrades are superior. MaNa might be able to blink micro and Warp Prism micro his way to victory, but that would be the most impressive thing I've seen in quite some time. And Immortal helps out at the last second. I don't think he's going to be breaking any bases, so he's going to try and commit.
It's not enough to just kill some of the army, because your opponent has a whole extra expansion compared to you. And MaNa's main base isn't really mining. He doesn't actually have a lot of probes in there because he's down 20 workers. So yeah, this is kind of what I was saying. Like, he has to make something happen. There is no scenario where he just kind of plays StarCraft. Like, that's not it. He's not just playing StarCraft anymore. He has to, with this army, kill stuff. And the Prism gets shut down. It's just a bunch of Stalkers and one Immortal. Not going to be enough. Hellraiser